everybody. Welcome along to tonight's ordinary meeting of the Buloke Shire Council. Again, a special welcome to Bernard Hogan, our new councillor, for her first regular meeting. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the young fellows down the back who are coming to see how this is all going to work. And I'd just ask you to stand for the statement of acknowledgement. I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet tonight and pay my respects to any elders, past, present or emerging, and from this community or any other communities. Thank you. Item 2, receipt of apologies.
No apologies, Mayor, with all councillors present.
Thank you. Confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting that was held on October the 2nd. Those minutes have been circulated. Would there be somebody that would like to move those minutes, please?
Happy to do that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Milne and a seconder. Councillor Pollard. Any discussion on those minutes? That's carried. Item 4, request for leave of absences. We have none at this stage. Thank you. Item 5, declaration of pecuniary and conflict of interest. In accordance with section 132 of the Local Government Act 2020, councillors who have a conflict of interest in respect to a matter being considered at this meeting must A. Disclose the conflict of interest in the manner required by the Council's Governance Rules 2020 and exclude themselves from the decision-making process in relation to this matter, including any discussion or vote on the matter, any council meeting or delegate committee, and any action relating to the matter. Are there any disclosures of conflict of interest?
Yes, I wish to make a discussion. For item 9.1.4, Virtual Community Housing Incorporated, guarantor of place request. I'm close to sound relevant of chairperson of that committee and would like to be excused.
Item 6, questions from the public. I believe we have one, Mr. Record.
We do, Mayor, thank you, and I'll read the question in full. And this question comes from Elder Uncle Bobby Nichols and Elder Uncle Gary Murray on behalf of First Nations peoples and traditional owners and custodians of Mount Witchyproof. Dear Mayor and Councillors, the Shire of Witchyproof was appointed on 24 February 1930 as a Committee of Management on the Mount Witchyproof Reserve, a site permanently reserved as a public park. The appointment was gazetted on 5 March 1930. The Shire of Buloke is the successor in law to the Shire of Witchyproof. The land comprising the reserve was permanently reserved as a site for a public park by an order in council of the Victorian Government on 4 December 1929. First Nations peoples, traditional owners, are extremely concerned that the sacred emus on Mount Witchyproof are not being maintained, protected or managed in any proper way by the Shire, despite the Shire well knowing that those sacred emus are sacred tokens to First Nations peoples and despite its obligations under the relevant legislation, you can see below. Indeed, First Nations peoples have been on the record since July 2015, that is over 7 years, that the Shire will take all proper steps to maintain and protect sacred emus and to maintain and protect Mount Witchyproof itself, which is a sacred site for First Nations traditional owners. In that time, that is over 7 years, the Shire has allowed the protected fencing to be taken down, removed and subjected the emus to ingress of a variety of predators, such that the sacred emus are continually at high risk. The Shire has not realised in over 7 years any valid proposals for the safekeeping, protection or maintenance of the sacred emus in that time. We note that Mr. Kevin O'Day, the Chairman of Charlton Tourism Incorporated, as well as Elder Uncle Bobby Nichols, have both personally attended council meetings and addressed the Shire, councillors and staff at a number of council meetings over the past months. In response, the Shire has advised that the Shire will get back to them, both in regard to these important issues and organise a meeting with stakeholders and the community. In recent months, there have been further statements that the Shire will get back to Mr. O'Day and First Nation peoples, however, this has not occurred. We also note statements contained in a letter of the then Victorian Minister for the Environment, the Honourable Lisa Neville, on 24 August 2015 to First Nations peoples and traditional owners, the Honourable Elisa Neville. She stated inter alia that native wildlife in Victoria is protected by the Wildlife Act 1975 and that wildlife officers from DELP had spoken to staff from the Buloke Shire to ensure they are aware of the legislation that protects wildlife, specifically emus at Mount Richard. We advise that if there is not substantial progress made in this matter prior to the next meeting of the Shire, that is by its December meeting, First Nations peoples and traditional owners intend referring this matter back immediately to the current Victorian Minister for the Environment, the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosio, or her successor, for the sacred emus and Mount Richard to be properly protected as per the requirements of the various relevant legislation, Crown Lands Act 1978, Wildlife Act 1975, and the Aboriginal Heritage Act 2006. And that concludes the question, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I'll ask Mr. Fitzgibbon to respond to that, who has been dealing with this matter.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, thank you to the elders and Mr. O'Day for the letter. So there's a range of questions asked here, and some of which have been answered in many forms by council, and we do understand that this protracted timeline is frustrating for all concerned, but council staff are liaising in good faith and moving as quickly as we can between multiple agencies of the state government. I did speak with Mr. O'Day by phone on the 6th of October, explaining the delays and reassuring him that council is working with DELP and First Peoples State Relations to help facilitate the sensitive nature of an on-country meeting to discuss the options with cultural risk and cost analysis at the centre of any proposed agenda. Mr. O'Day reported to be comfortable with the progress during the call and was pleased to be updated. The options I refer to are being, as stated in the Mount Richard Proof Emu Management Plan, which are the two options are maintaining the emus as a captive population or releasing the emus. Buloke is, of course, a small rural council that does not have the capacity or the skills to facilitate such a sensitive meeting. Council is again engaging with First Peoples State Relations after some back and forth between the agencies of First Peoples State Relations and DELP, and mitigated, or sorry, probably muddied a little bit more by some departing staff from First Peoples State Relations to get this meeting happening. Council is invested in an outcome for the Emu population on Mount Richard Proof, and whilst we emphasise with the urgency and the timeline set in the letter for December, please keep in mind that both council and both of these state agencies are in the middle of a natural disaster response and recovery. The emus remain cared for in line with relevant legislation, and council are in regular contact with DELP in matters relating to the Wildlife Act 1975. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgibbon. Item 7.1, report of councillors' assemblies. The council had a briefing assembly on the 5th of October, and the second one was cancelled due to the flooding. And this is just to note the report of that briefing meetings. We'll have someone who would care to move the record of assembly, please. The 5th of October. Councillor Simpson, second. Councillor Mill, any discussion? Carried. 7.2, letters of congratulation and recognition of achievements. There are none listed. Do the councillors have any to add at this stage?
Just through the chair, may be appropriate, given that just recently Minister Yala announced her retirement from Parliament, from the upper house. Yala has been a strong supporter of Buloke Shire over many years, significantly so. I think it's probably appropriate that we express our gratitude. She came through here, and I was lucky enough to be able to show around the flood damage and so forth just recently. She does have a soft spot for Buloke, and I think it would be appropriate to write to her to thank her for her service and wish her well with her future endeavours.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. And could I have a seconder to that motion, please?
Yeah, most certainly.
Councillor Mill. Councillor Mill. Any other discussion? Those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. 7.3, Correspondence initiated by council. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. There's an update on some of the correspondence that we've received there. It's all detailed in the report. Mayor, there's a recommendation before council that they note the report of correspondence.
Somebody care to note this report of correspondence, please? Okay, sorry.
Just a comment if I can,
Yes, yes.
but we'll note it and then comment.
Yeah, let's get up there in a second and then you can speak to the motion.
Move, councillor. Second, please.
Yeah, I can second that.
Thank you, councillor Warren. Councillor Mill.
Just a note in the correspondence back through you, Mr. Mayor, that it appears that we may have some traction. Maybe a little bit of traction in our desire to have an updated training schedule set for swimming pools for lifeguards, in that the existing one requires 200 metres over 6 minutes for swimming, which obviously rules out quite a number of willing people to operate in local council pools. So it is good that maybe they are thinking down the same track. And I just guess that we need to keep the pressure on them, make sure that they don't lose sight of the endeavour. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Mill. You'd like to speak to the?
No, I don't. No,
Thank
it
you.
speaks for itself.
No worries. Moved by councillor Mill and seconded by councillor Warren that the correspondence be noted. All those in favour?
Yeah.
Against, carried. 7.4, building permits monthly update, works and technical services.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to present this report as a procedural matter for council every month, reflecting the permits issued by our own surveyor and the private government surveyors around the district. Mayor.
Right. At the council note, the information contained in the report of the building permits and approved by staff from 1 October to 31st of October. Move for that, please.
Happy to move that to Mr. Mayor.
Thank
I also
you.
have a comment too.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Councillor Warren. Seconder, please. Councillor Pollard. Any discussion?
Yep, I noticed the Berrywood Birchip Road, Birchip, which is, I suppose, the Melly Bridge Roundup. There was a pope issued by council. Now, you may or may not be aware that event was cancelled due to the floods and the rain, etc. I'm wondering if, in the goodness of council's heart, if there could be a refund made, because I know the efforts that that group went to. I mean, they certainly approached me in my role. I was able to organise insurance for them for the event to go ahead, which was tedious in itself. And I think what we could do perhaps is just soften the blow a little bit, because that is a major fundraiser for the Virgin community, and they'll be sadly hurt this year with the fact that that event hasn't gone ahead. So if we can do something just to soften it a little bit, I think it should be within our realm to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Warren, and through you, Mayor, yes, certainly we'll be able to have a discussion with the organisers of that event and to be able to utilise our development policy to be able to provide a refund for that token.
Thank you.
Moved by councillor Neal and seconded by councillor Warren. Any further discussion? All those in favour?
Yes.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Planning applications received, monthly update. The works and technical services, I'm sure that would be you again, Mr.
Thank you. I'll take that. Thank you, Mayor. So again, a procedural report to council every month, highlighting the continuing very busy planning office at the moment. Mayor, there's a recommendation for council so they know the information contained in the report.
Thank you. Council note the information contained in the report on the planning application under consideration by staff and the status of each application. Would there be a mover for that, please?
Move that.
Councillor Warren and a seconder. Councillor Pollard, thank you. Any discussion?
Yes. I noticed at the top of the tree, a application dated the 11th, 2021. The anniversary date is coming up very, very shortly. I just wonder, I know our planning department is extremely busy, but it seems an extraordinarily long time when we have opportunity for economic development and it's not being met. Do we have any reason why? And if there is a reason, can we put a bomb on someone and get it? Because I mean, that's just not good.
Thank you, Councillor Warren, and through you, Mayor. Yes, the delays have been between the applicant and the referral agency, and notably Rural Roads Victoria. I did note an email from the relevant manager today who puts that onto the agenda to be brought before council for February meeting.
I hope it's Valentine's Day.
Thank you. That a mover and a seconder on that motion. Any further discussion? All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. 7.6, status of action on past council meetings resolutions. Mr. O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor, and again, procedural report just highlighting the actions undertaken as a result of council resolutions in recent months. There's a recommendation before council's Mayor for them to note the status of the action.
Mr. O'Toole. Would somebody care to move that report be noted, please? Councillor Hogan, the seconder. Councillor Pollard, thank you. Any discussion?
Just an observation, Mr. Mayor. I notice some of these are completed. Can they be removed?
Thank you, Councillor Warren, for the question. And yes, we can remove them to ensure that it's always brought up to current date.
Let's save some paper.
Item 8, 8.1 policy reports, and 8.11 sale of land policy. Works and technical services.
This is you, Representative Mayor.
Thank you. This is you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, Council's long-term community vision and council plan identifies one of the key challenges facing our municipalities, the identification and availability of land to build and develop. Noting the potential for the council to unlock parcels of land for future development, council officers have developed the sale of land policy, which outlines the council position on the sale of council land. The policy outlines strategic considerations associated with the sale of land, which should be taken into account by the council, as well as specific legislative parameters within which we must operate. This report recommends the adoption of the council's sale of land policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move it for the recommendation that the council adopt the sale of land policy, please. Councillor
Yeah,
Hill,
happy to do that, Mr. Mayor.
a seconder. Councillor Hogan, any discussion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, only to say that it's good to have a clear policy for this sort of thing, because you need to be upfront and we seem to be doing the right thing, so that everybody gets to go an opportunity if they wish to speak against it or put a bid in for it. They all know what's going on, so it's good to have a clear policy. Thank you.
Councillor Hogan.
Take over.
Any other discussion?
Just point of clarification, really. I suppose this land will be assessed by a valuer. What's the process of engaging a valuer? And who is the valuer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, historically we've used the subcontractor to the valuer general to undertake our valuations of our property.
Okay, so it's an external body. Terrific, thank you.
It was moved by Councillor Pollard and Councillor Milne, seconded by Councillor
Hogan, second, Mayor.
All those in favour of this motion? Against? Carried. Thank you. Through this book. 8.12 risk management policy and risk management framework. Mrs. Hugh, is that you again, I would imagine?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It certainly is. And through you, Council's risk management policy and risk management framework have recently been reviewed as part of Council's overarching policy review schedule. Prior to undertaking this particular review, Council engaged RSC audit, our internal auditors, to undertake an internal audit of its risk management processes ahead of the review period. Findings and recommendations from that audit have been incorporated within these documents and outlined a number of key initiatives to promote consistency of risk management within the council, taking into account council strategic and operational objectives and changes to operations and processes since the last review period. Both of these documents have been presented to the Council's Audit and Risk Committee or feedback, and any feedback they provided has likewise been incorporated. These documents are presented to council tonight with recommendations for adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Hugh. So the recommendation that council adopt a risk management policy and risk management framework. Someone can move that, please. Councillor Pollard, thank you. And seconder. Councillor Simpson, thank you very much. Discussion.
No, I just think it's fantastic to feel that just cast their eyes across this policy, because they have a lot better idea, a lot more expertise than I have, and we'd like to thank them for doing that. And give us a policy that we can work with and try and minimise some risk.
Thank you, Councillor Pollard. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to make a comment, especially for our audience tonight, in that once these policies are adopted, they generally go, or always go, onto our website, so they are available for anybody to access.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. As moved and seconded, all those in favour? Thank you. Against? Carried. Thank you. 8.2.1, community grants and sponsorships. Mr. Fitzgibbon.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, councillors, I'm pleased to present the Community Grants and Sponsorship Program report with 3 project support applications, one each from the Sea Lake Golf Club, Sea Lake Golf Club and Bowls Club, Charlton Forum and the Litchfield Caravan Park, and one application to the Sustainability Grant Fund from Charlton Parks Community Asset Committee. All applications have been assessed as per your guidelines with 4 applied for amounts recommended to council. I'm pleased to present this report to councillors for their consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgibbon. Recommendation that council consider the following funding under the Community Grants and Sponsorship Program. $2,000 project support grant to Sea Lake Golf and Bowls Club. $459.25 project support to Charlton Forum. $1,000 project support grant to the Witchy Caravan Park, and $6,481.82 sustainability grant to Charlton Park Community Asset Committee. Does someone care to move those, please?
Those are select.
Thank you, Councillor Pollard. And seconder? Councillor Hogan. Thank you. Any discussion?
It's great to see this project's going along in our communities. I'm very interested to see the 82 cents on the sustainability grant one. They must have an exact quote, because I haven't seen anything coming up that close.
Thank you, Councillor Pollard. Any further discussion?
It has those same words too, Councillor Pollard too. If we look at the Charlton Travellers Rest, 25 cents.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. We have a mover and a seconder for that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. 8.2.2, Audit and Risk Committee Charter. Mrs. Hugh, I believe that will be you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, the current Audit and Risk Committee Charter, which was adopted by the Council in August 2020, provides for a biannual review of the Charter to make sure that it continues to reflect best practice and remains reflective of the Audit Committee's remit. Key changes recommended by the Audit and Risk Committee are outlined in the body of the report, and those changes have been reflected in the Charter. I would like to draw Council's attention to an error that I made in the main body of the report, which identifies the Deputy Mayor as being a further member of the committee. The Charter provides that the additional member of a councillor to that committee will be delegated in the Council's annual statutory meeting, which of course occurred earlier this evening. This report recommends the adoption of the Charter by the Council.
Thank you, Mrs. Hugh. The recommendation that council approve the Audit and Risk Committee Charter as attached. Do I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Hogan, a seconder. Councillor Pollard, thank you. Any discussion? Moved by Councillor Hogan and seconded by Councillor Pollard. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. 8.2.3, Audit and Risk Committee Chair Report. Mrs. Hugh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, the biennial report from the chair of the audit committee was provided to the chief executive officer on the 6th of October this year. It describes the activities of the audit and risk committee and includes its finding and recommendations. This report recommends the council note the contents of that report.
Thank you, Mrs. Yu. The recommendation that council note the biannual report, or audit and risk report from the chair of the audit and risk committee. Can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Stewart, all right, Councillor Simpson, wrong side of the table. Councillor Seconder, please.
Happy to do that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Milne, any discussion?
I'd just like to say that I attend almost all of the audit and risk committee meetings and always feel as though they have given a very good eye to our council policies and finances.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Milne.
No, nothing to comment.
Moved by Councillor Simpson and seconded by Councillor Milne that we adopt that, note that report. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. 8.2.5, financial and performance statements.
April 2024.
Oh, I missed
Yeah,
one.
that one, yeah.
That's all right. Sorry.
83, man.
Go back a bit. 8.2.4, reappointment of independent member, audit and risk committee. This is you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Mr. Dean Slee was initially appointed as an independent member to the Audit and Risk Committee in November 2019 and will conclude his first term as independent member on the 14th of November this year. This report recommends his reappointment for a second term of 3 years on the Audit and Risk Committee commencing 15th of November 2022.
Thank you, Mrs. Yu. The recommendation, council, is that council reappoint Mr. Dean Slew as independent Slew.
Yeah, Slade.
Slade.
What's Slade?
Slew. We'll get him right. As an independent member of the council's audit and risk committee for a further term of 3 years, commencing 15th of November 2022 and expiring 15th of November 2025. Would somebody care to move that, please? Councillor Stewart, thank you. And seconder. Councillor Hogan, any discussion?
I was on the original selection panel for that appointment, and he was very impressive. So and he's continued to be so. So I think, yeah, definitely deserves enough time.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Moved by Councillor Stewart and seconded by Councillor Hogan. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. 8.2.5, financial and performance statements.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, happy to present this report. Councillors will no doubt be aware that this report is coming around for a second time after we received advice from the Victorian Auditor General's Office to be able to update our report to reflect the recent flood events, and that should go into the report. So, Mayor, there's a recommendation for council that they note the updated notes of the financial statement and authorise the Mayor, Councillor Warren, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Paul, all out of date now, aren't they, Mayor? That would authorise for the Mayor, Councillor Warren and the Deputy Mayor to be able to sign the financial statements this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
We need to change that.
Yeah, no, as I've read out, we'll pick that in a minute.
Recommendation to council notes the updated notes of the financial statements for the year ending 30 June 2022. And note 8.5 events occurred after the balance date and confirm the authorisation of the Mayor, Councillor Warren, and the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Getty, to sign the final form financial statements and performance statements on behalf of and with full authority of council. Can move that, please. Thank you, Councillor Warren. And a seconder. Councillor Simpson, thank you. Discussion? Councillor Simpson?
Yeah, sorry, we need that alteration. We can't move.
To move an amendment. I'd like to move an amendment.
Thank you.
Councillor Follow.
I'd like to move the amendment that we update the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor to those who were selected in the previous meeting.
Thank you,
So it
Councillor
will
Follow.
be Mayor Getley, Deputy Mayor Pollard.
Seconded for that amendment, please.
I'm happy to accept the
Oh, sorry, the mover and seconder, are happy to accept that?
The only comment I have is we're talking about a period of time when I was the mayor and you were the deputy mayor. Is that not the situation, what we're moving and accepting from that point of view? We're talking about a time in history when there was a mayor and a deputy mayor rather than now, when there's different mayor and deputy mayor. That would be my only comment.
through you was being signed. I think that the situation is that whoever signed the documents because they were dated today needs to be the one.
Yeah, it's through you now, it's been my view as well. So
Okay,
that's
that's
one
fine.
is signed by the mayor of the day,
Okay, not the person that was,
mayor when we first signed.
okay. Okay, oh, I'm happy to accept that amendment on that advice.
Councillor Stewart, Councillor Simpson, sorry.
Yes.
So as the amendment by Councillor Pollard, and now has been accepted, Councillor Pollard, do you move that amendment? I think you do that.
Well, we've moved the amendment, now we've got to vote on the amendment to include it.
Right, so we need a seconder for the amendment.
This is just
So
an
you've got the motion, move
it's
the
an
second.
alteration to the motion, hasn't changed the intent of the motion, Mr. Mayor, so you can just accept the alteration provided the mover and the seconder are happy to accept and then the motion.
All right, so I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour?
Happy.
Against? Carried. Right. All right. Okay, thank you.
Page 156.
Uh, 8.3.1 financial report as at the 30th September 2022. Mr. O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I'm pleased to present this quarterly report to councillors, highlighting the activities from a financial perspective, noting that there are attachments including income statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement, cash flow forecast, cash flow chart, and a capital works statement. Mayor, there's a recommendation before councillors for the consideration.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Recommendation that council receives and notes financial performance report for the month ending 30th September 2022. I'll be the mover for that, please. Councillor Pollard and a seconder.
Yeah, happy to second that.
Councillor Mill. Discussion?
No.
No discussion.
No, I'm happy with the report as presented. Thank you.
Any further discussion? No, I'll put that to the vote that the council receive and note the financial statement report for the month ending 30th September. All those in favour, please. Against, that's carried. Thank you.
8.5, page 172.
That's all right. 8.5 reports from councillors. We'll go around the table. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did provide a report which hasn't been incorporated in the minutes, but just to give you an overview of the last month, it's been rather hectic one way or the other. There has been a lot of, I suppose, media inquiries about the flood situation in Buloke Shire. There's also been a hell of a lot of some politicians getting an opportunity to come and do that. We have impressed at all times with the politicians the need for my significant financial support of the Shire as it recovers from the flood situation. There's been the usual round of meetings and so forth, but I think one thing, and I'll give this as a bit of advice, that the relationships that have been developed in the last 3 weeks really need to be nurtured, because if we're to get anything out of this devastating flood situation, we need to have all hands on deck and working effectively for the Shire to make sure that the politicians are kept to their promise. If they're not kept to their promise, we end up going down the toilet in terms of that. So I think that would be, I suppose, one of the things. A fair lot of greasing of palms is well in the game, because we really need to capitalise, as I said to staff on numerous times in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Never waste a crisis. We've got the best crisis we can have, because there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow we can milk. So all the best with that.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Mill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, there's 2 or 3 things that I'll touch on. Firstly, one of the important local jobs was the Birchip Forum AGM. And unfortunately, at that AGM, they were unable to secure a current chair. Having Jack Goldsmith had served 2 years and has a fair bit of private project on, building a house and a few other things, plus a number of businesses that he's in. So he chose to have a break. And at that point in time, there was nobody available to take that spot. However, he did take the chair of the position of secretary. Vice was, Bern, I'm looking at you, please. Councillor Hogan now, sorry.
What's his name, Jake's one?
Oh, yes, Alison McGowan. And as I said, Jack took the position of secretary, which was relinquished by JR. And treasurer remained the same with Jennifer. Yep. So at this point in time, I was poked by ex-councillor Sharp to chair those meetings in the interim, but I hope they might find a chairman very soon going forward to keep that vibrant little community forum going. Attended Grampians Tourism Forum as guests of Grampians Tourism to see the launch of their current strategy going forward with their list of projects. And it's good to be eventually, I suppose, currently being somewhat courted by Grampians Tourism. We've also had a Buloke Tourism and a Women Mallee Tourism Board meeting in the last month. And there's quite a number of things certainly that come out of both of them. We're happy to provide some of this stuff that can go in the bulletin. Certainly, Women Mallee Tourism is in a place at the moment where we need now to agree or to sign the memorandum of understanding with Women Development Association, which we haven't done yet. There's still a few sticky things, but we certainly have the campaign report for the Stay West campaign that's been running. We've got and a full project update for Women Mallee Tourism, which I think is about time. So I'll hand that to somebody that can get out on the bulletin for everybody to have a look at. And the last one I attended was the Rail Freight Alliance in Melbourne last week, and a lot of work going on in that space. Not a lot of traction with government at the moment, but the chair and the executive are still working on that. And speaking of the executive, the next meeting will be the AGM. So there'll be probably a change in regard, given that some members were already on leave of absence, given that they are standing as independents for elections in different places. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mill. Councillor Stewart.
I don't have a lot to report from my attendances, but the one thing I do want to highlight is that I have received a lot of calls about roads, obviously, with the floods. And I understand that we're looking at prioritising roads for repair. However, we not only need to prioritise, we also need to make sure that's expedited, because there is so many dangerous roads at the moment. So we just really need to keep that in mind, even to the point where we may have to consider employing more resources to be able to attend to that, because some of the roads are in absolutely disgusting condition. That we really need to make sure that's a priority. So, thank you.
Councillor Stewart. Councillor Pollard.
I'd just like to mention I was with the Friends of Mount Wycheproof trialling out a steam weeder, for want of a better word. It's a very interesting one. It's several different fittings on it. The boiler is diesel powered, and the one that we saw has had a petrol powered pump, which is probably not a good idea. You're better off with 2 diesel powered, so as you don't mix the fuels up. But it was tried on the gazanias and a few other little marshmallows and weeds up on near the old principal's location on the mount, Wychbury. And I was hoping to get up there today and have a look to see the results of the work, because I've got to see them before I can really approve it. Because I did a square block, I've seen a few photos of where there's a little spike that goes into the roots and it just explodes the root system. And within several hours, the gazanias were wilting. And it was reasonably quick to use, which surprised me. I want to have a look at the results, and there's probably a suggestion that we look at putting one for get our staff to operate. A lot of councils are starting to use them on the weeds on footpaths. And the idea being is there's no chemical involved, it's just water. So there's no chemical issues. There's a couple of fittings with it. Basically, one little square hut, just sit over the weed, pull the trigger for 2 seconds, and the weed's dead. The one I used was about, I'm an old school, about 18 inches wide. What's that? In about 400 mil. To basically just cover a wider area. And I'm curious to see how that worked, to see if the steam got leak into the cavity. But I think it's something to consider. Anna was there from the council staff, so she'd have a good idea. And the horses come down from Mildura to show it to us.
Very good. Sounds an interesting concept.
Mr. Mayor, can I just comment that we need one about 10 times bigger than that if we're going to do all the gazanias in the Shire. If not 20 times bigger.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Simpson.
To follow up on Councillor Pollard's weed excursion, I attended the Mount Wychbury meeting, at which there was considerable discussion. I have received photographs of the dead weeds, and the amazing thing about it is that the spike has appeared to kill the rhizome of the gazanias, which is pretty impressive. We're probably looking at about a $50,000 price tag, but because it is so safe to use, councils use it during the day in the street when people are around, and if we can have environmental weed control, environmentally sustainable environmental weed control, it would be quite a step forward. Also attended the North Central Land Board meeting, which was Zoom because of floods and nobody could get there. And apart from my road, Ewan Green Road collapsing, nothing very exciting.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Hayden, probably a little
Nothing
bit.
to report, but it sounds like an interesting list of things that people are attending, so.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Look, through the month, I attended flood meetings, Charlton, Sea Lake, Sea Lake in Councillor Warren's absence. Had discussions with Mallee CMA regarding Calgoa's weir pool and what we can do with that. Now, there's water there and thing. And other than that, all my other meetings were flooded out. Thank you. Item 9, other business, and 9.1, notice of motion. 9.11, a notice of motion to thank the community for their support of the emergency relief centre. Councillor Pollard, I believe you will speak to this.
Would you like to speak to it first, or would you like me to move it first?
Well, we can do either. Somebody said the recommendation that council write a letter of appreciation to the listed groups and businesses, thanking them for their support of the emergency relief centre. Someone care to move that, please?
I'd like to move that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Pollard, and a seconder. Councillor Hogan, thank you. Discussion, please.
the fantastic work that the Witchy community did and the clubs and organisations. I didn't manage to get up to there at the centre, but I was just hearing by the grapevine that the work, those Lions clubs are up there cooking breakfast, there's people up there supporting members of the child community. And I just think it was great that the community got behind it to support one of the neighbouring communities' residents when they were basically forced on I'd call it nearly a forced holiday with short notice.
Thank you, Councillor Pollard. Any other comments?
Oh, just it's reflective of the Witchy community. They're a very strong community. It's great to see that type of support for the neighbours.
Councillor Simpson?
Could I also add the Witchy Proof Caravan Park to the list? They hosted many extra caravans of people taking refuge in Witchy Proof, and their laundry facilities were very much utilised.
Yeah, so amended motion's been proposed, so go back to the legal and second amendment.
Councillor Pollard, are you happy with that amendment? Are you accepting the amendment?
We need a second.
Need a second.
No, second.
Second.
Councillor Milne, second the amendment.
Discussion. Thank you.
Councillor Pollard, are you happy with that?
Yeah, then you vote on the amendment.
Sorry, we're going to vote on, we'll get this right, shortly. Okay, so the amendment is that we include the Witchy Proof Caravan Park in the attached list of businesses that supported that. Moved by Councillor Simpson and seconded by Councillor Milne. All those in favour? That's carried.
Back to the-
Now I'll refer back to the original motion that was moved by Councillor Pollard and seconded by Councillor Hogan, that the council right letter of appreciation. All those in favour of that?
I second.
It's carried. Thank you. Uh, 9.1.2, advocating for realistic funding for flood repair for local roads. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have a recommendation here that council advocate to the federal government for better work to include in disaster recovery funding arrangements, funding scheme to enable council to reconstruct assets to a more disaster resilient standard than of its pre-disaster function. I'm happy to move that recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Second for that motion, please.
Yeah, I can see that. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Stewart. Any further discussion?
Look, I just say that, as I touched on before, there's been a lot of discussion between various people in regard to the current situation where we're not able to, if you like, fix the problem. We can only reinstate the problem to its previous situation. This is probably very relevant, say, at Birchip, where we have a flood event, we have to cut the road and cuts them off, obviously, from Witchy Proof and other areas of the Shire. In terms of that, I've had great support from Dr. Anne Webster, who was able to get me to speak to the federal minister, Mr. Watt, about this now, to reinforce our situation that we really need support in this thing so that we can overcome these problems rather than just return it to the, I suppose, pre-flood condition, which in many cases is not the ideal. But I mean, this won't be for all. So I think Councillor Milne pointed out, it's not everyone, but there's certainly ones that stick out that we need to be aware of, that we need to make better. And, it'll pan out in the fact if you accept that climate change is going to happen and these events are going to continue to happen, we're going to be confronted with this going forward. So we need to be totally aware of it.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Any further discussion?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to actually move the amendment because I think it's fantastic that the motion is advocating the federal government, but I think we should be advocating to the Victorian government as well. So I'd like to move the motion that we advocate to, I'll move an amendment that to include that we advocate to the Victorian government for the establishment of an infrastructure betterment fund to enable councils and communities becoming more resilient by restoring council-owned infrastructure affected by emergencies such as fire and floods to be repaired and rebuilt to a more resilient contemporary standard. We've seen, as in Councillor Warren has said, we've actually seen a lot of our floodways around the Charlton area that we've just repaired from the 2016 event. We've got to go and do it all again because we weren't allowed to build it to a little bit better standard, so we don't have to go back and do it. Oh, I've moved it. Someone like to say it.
Councillor Stewart, thank you. Councillor Warren, will accept the amendment.
No,
I'm happy to.
Oh, sorry, so we're looking for what's in on it.
Unless you want to.
So all those in favour of Councillor Pollard's amendment?
Yes.
Against, carried.
Now the amendment joins the original motion.
So we've got a mover,
I've got a mover for the original motion
Second
and a
for the
second, yeah.
and then
Yeah.
Happy to accept.
Happy to accept that?
Happy to accept that. Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
yeah, it does.
So, okay. All those in favour of the new motion with the amendment,
So that amendment is federal and state.
federal
government.
and state government, that's correct. Again, that's carried. Thank you. 9.1.3, we have another notice of motion that the council acknowledge the efforts of council staff during the flood event and congratulate them on their dedication and care to the Buloke community, and when appropriate, the Chief Executive Office schedule a gathering for all staff to thank them for their efforts.
I'm happy to move that recommendation. I suppose one thing I would note that, and I've had this feedback right across, I suppose, the Shire as I've moved around, has been the incredible effort undertaken by council staff. And I have I suppose, the good fortune to be able to observe a lot of that effort. I mean, the amount of work, effort, etc., that was put in by our council staff. And I must say, under very trying circumstances, because normally speaking, for those that have been involved, I certainly haven't been in emergency situations. The lead agency here was not the council. And I mean, I was forced, I suppose, at one stage to go onto the Neil Mitchell show and basically say, where are the lead agencies? Because our council staff were carrying the can, basically, for state government agencies that didn't show up. It was interesting though, as soon as that interview went to air, the government turned up. The phone started ringing, and I think, you know, they might say that we don't go on the Neil Mitchell show, but I can tell you they all listen to Neil Mitchell, which is a very good thing. But look, I can't, and I know the community can't speak highly enough of our staff. That they have done everything above and beyond. I mean, we will also remember that our staff were just as impacted by the community of these events. So at the same time, they're trying to do their job and support and save their communities, they've got the same issues at home. And I mean, and that's, you know, right down the line. So I'm happy to move that recommendation. I mean, I don't think there's enough we can do. And I mean, my small contribution to a few lousy fruitcakes and a few sponges to keep the spirits up. I mean, you know, it's only a very small amount, but I know it's appreciated. So I'm happy to move that recommendation. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Do I have a second for that motion? Councillor Hall, further discussion?
Our staff have done a fantastic job. And I think some of our staff have actually said, regard to some of our staff as a clan from another location, have actually brought in and said they've brought him into their communities as well, which is fantastic because that means he's made an entrance into other communities and he's not regarded as just a fellow from another location.
Thank you, Councillor Pollard. I'd just like to add that I was in the street on Sunday night, early hours of Monday morning at 12:30, when the water was impacting Charlton, and to see the council staff blocking drains, sandbagging drains, putting up temporary levees to push the water around at that hour of the morning, and with a smile on their face, still doing the job. I also like to acknowledge the work that Travis Fitzgibbon did. He did a power of work. He provided me with updates on my ward when I was unable to get there, with no trouble for him. He had very little sleep. He did a power of work, and this is very much a thank you to you as well, Travis, and the other senior management staff that I did deal with over that time. So, as Councillor Warren said, it was a hell of an effort, and they did a wonderful job. Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I think the other thing that I'd like to say is that not only were staff involved in one location across the Shire, as it turned out, it was numerous locations at the same time, all consecutively, quite quickly, one after the other. So there was no time to rest. And of course, the other thing that we need to consider now is that a lot of their other work is well behind, and they may well attract criticism because the nature strips are not mowed or the jobs aren't done. But you know, I think that they all deserve the big pat on the back for how they rallied for the community's sake, and that if they do get a bit of criticism, that we're quick to their defence and point out to those that might just exactly where it sits and how it is. So happy to support this motion going forward, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Milne, further conversation? Comments?
Mayor, if I may also just to reiterate those comments that made by councillors, but also acknowledge probably the back of house staff. So whilst we had a lot of staff out on the roads, equally we had staff who were making sure everything was procured, and that the payroll, which was quite significant in terms of overtime, that was process of people got paid, and the IT was all kept up to date, both at the relief centre and indeed out on the street and in the municipal operation control centre as well. So acknowledge all staff, both those that are customer facing and those behind the scenes as well, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. That has been moved by Councillor Warren and seconded by Councillor Pollard. All those in favour?
Yes.
That's carried. Thank you.
And may I do a Leo, please, Mr Mayor? I did hear, as I came in the door today, that we were congratulated on our communications from outside the Shire as to how the communication was done, and by the small team that does that work. So apparently we performed a lot better than some of the major centres with the information going out. So congratulations.
Thank you, councillors.
9.14, Birchip Community Housing Incorporated guarantor for loan.
Yes, I need to leave this one. because I have not-
Councillor Hogan has indicated she does have a conflict of interest, and move through. The recommendation from council commit to the ongoing advocacy for the other tiers of government in conjunction with the Birchip Community Housing Group to attract and secure funding to address Birchip's rental housing crisis and its economic development impact. And 2, in the event funding is secured for the Birchip Community Housing Group funded, consider opportunities within its policy framework and adopted budget to support the project delivery. Another mover for that, please.
I'm happy to move that, and
Councillor Milne.
thank you, Mr Mayor.
The seconder, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Milne, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor, and through you, this motion comes about because of the fact that Birchip Housing Community Housing Group has now twice applied for funding for the next round of housing in Birchip, and we all know how important housing is at the moment. It's a hot topic in all our communities, certainly right across the state. But this is the second time that Birchip has been unsuccessful for this project, and I guess what we did at the last meeting to review the policy around loaning or guarantoring money to groups was with a light that if they were successful, that we were able to help them. And I guess through this motion, I just want to, and has been provided here in the summary, it's it's a lot of work that's gone into housing for particular Birchip in this case by this group, and with a vision for much more in the future. I just wanted to be able to maybe reassure that group that because they were unsuccessful, that we still have the facility, one way, shape or form, to help them if they are successful in any way going forward. And I guess as a side to that, I mean, it was also disappointing to see that the Nexus project, the Birchip Property Group, also missed out on funding when we are looking for lots and lots of housing projects. So anyway, I'm happy to put this motion for the council to consider.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. Councillor Simpson.
Just to reiterate what Councillor Milne has said, and to note that the Birchip Community Housing Group has successfully built and funded and made available to the community housing opportunities in the past.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Moved by Councillor Milne and seconded by Councillor Simpson that the recommendation be accepted. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. They're doing the dishes.
Thank you, Mayor. As Councillor Hogan's re-entering the chamber, I'd just like to be able to inform her that motion was passed as recommended by council.
Okay.
9.2, questions from councillors. None listed. If any councillor got some questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a question on notice, I guess, because of the amount of work that's gone on. But what Councillor Stewart referred to our roads and the condition of the roads, we've also had a lot of inquiry about roadside slashing and the potential to get that carried out. I mean, it is in some cases like driving through a wall, and we know that one slashing is probably not going to cut it, but we've got to get around it first once. So maybe just an update to the community at some stage as to what our projected timelines might be for slashing, and a contentious one, I guess. But is there any, to maybe whether there's any opportunity for private operators to get involved? Now, I understand that could be difficult, but I mean, I don't think we're going to be able to get this whole program done on our own.
Yeah. Mrs. Yu wants to provide a response now. I'll take that on notice, Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly we're happy to provide some information to the community on timeframes, and Councillor Milne is quite right. It's likely we're going to have to do multiple runs this year. I will find out the extent to which we can cover outside of the project we're currently engaged with.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Simpson?
To reiterate what Councillor Stewart has said, we are getting a lot of feedback from the local community on the roads conditions, and wonder if we're going to be able to get some sort of update on our road hierarchy, and whether this can be noted through to the local communities.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking if we can provide some further information to the community in relation to the status of the roads.
And with what we're doing regarding the road hierarchy. So, roads that have been washed out, the communities are asking when we're going to be looking at them and how soon something can be done.
Yeah, so certainly just briefly on that, I'm happy to work with the media and communications team, Mr. Mayor, providing whatever details we can. We're working with some assessors on our road network with engineering qualifications and experience to make sure that the roads that are presently closed are going to be safe by reopening the roads. So that is likely to take some time given the extent of the flooding and the number of roads that we have in our road network. But we've been working with the Department of Transport via a roads assessor today in relation to being able to fund those activities, because it's quite important that wherever we can, we get external funding for any rectification and restoration works. Otherwise, it's at council's own cost to undertake those works. So there's been a whole range of people external to the organisation and internal that has been engaged in those initial discussions. And we are also working with the first meetings at 2 o'clock tomorrow in Charlton to talk about prioritising roads based on bus routes and key sort of passage to market issues for the upcoming months as well.
Councillor Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And further on roads, I guess 2 points I did notice on the Birchip Donald or Birchip Correct Road today that there is some work has commenced, including potholes and bits and pieces, which is good, but it I'll be still there at Christmas time. But I guess my comment is that moving around the Shire and outside the Shire and you know, from one end of the state to the other, in like Mildura one weekend, Melbourne the next, the road network is in an atrocious state across the state. We are that far behind on maintenance now, and you know, maintenance can't be done, you know, on a lot of roads because of the fact that they're still wet at the moment, and I just see us being in a real situation in 6 months' time that it just beggars me how we're going to get out. We'll have our own plan, but statewide, it's going to be multiplied, you know, 20 or 30 times over, or as many shires as 73 times, 79 times over. But you know, after a harvest, which is while it's damaged, it's still going to be big. And the roads are in bad repair now. I mean, there was a section on one bit of road that I travelled last week on the Wednesday job. This week, there is probably 300 yards of that road that is disintegrating. There is nothing there. And I just wonder, you know, where we're going and what we're doing. The government is not, or somebody's not paying enough attention to where it's at now and where it's going to be in 6 months, 12 months' time.
Thank you, Councillor Will. Any other questions?
Yes. Mr. Mayor, just a couple. Maybe staff could appraise the current situation of the Birchip Civic Master Plan. When are we due to see a final report on that particular matter, and we can make decisions about that? It seems to have dropped off the radar somewhat.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Warren is exactly right. Due to staff redeployment associated with the flooding events, that hasn't been at present the priority of the Infrastructure and Delivery Directorate. However, still very much under active consideration, and as soon as resources and time allows, it is my intention that we revisit both the precinct master plan, but also the work that's being undertaken to date, and further work required for the recreation and urban version as well.
So that's probably next year something.
At this stage, yes, quite possibly.
And the other one that maybe CEO could help me out with, for some considerable time, I've been asking for a report on the status of committee of managements that we have dealt with. It's been over 6 months that I've been asking for this report. Any indication that I might receive?
Ms. Beckery and Councillor Warren, there appears to be some administrative oversight that was provided internally for the distribution to councils, but I'm happy to circulate that directly across the state.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. No other questions. 9.3, urgent business, I have none listed. 9.4, any other business? 1.5, matters that may exclude the public, nil, which brings us to item 10, meeting closed. So I do thank you for your attendance. I thank the gallery up there for their attendance. I hope we didn't bore you too much and you might have learned something along the way. And hopefully haven't put you off local government in the future. Oh, Kevin, we'll put you off, have we? I'm sorry, mate. Thank you very much, and that concludes tonight's meeting.